that there were scuffles at least, that these people were obstructing justice. I would think you'd actually, as the chief law enforcement officer of Minnesota, be concerned about people obstructing justice. So, putting their cars in streets, blocking roads. I would think as chief law enforcement, you would be concerned about that, but were you ever concerned about encouraging, I guess, people to support you to go out and put themselves into harm's way?
No, we never.
Impeding and obstructing illegal law enforcement action. Did that ever concern you?
Sir, that never happened. We all times said, if you want to protest, protest peacefully, protest safely. But you'll never find me being against the First Amendment
right now, but
I'll always be for the First Amendment.
But you were seeing the scuffles, right? You were seeing and by the way, Minneapolis police officials could not help protect ICE officials, right? I mean, Representative Niska, isn't that, when you're talking about the nullification of federal law, isn't that one of the, Hennepin County, that they simply could not help and protect ICE in their legal law enforcement actions?
The Minneapolis Police Department issued guidance in July saying that they would not even help with crowd control around immigration operations. And Minnesota leaders encouraged that kind of action. The Minnesota Lieutenant Governor encouraged people to put their bodies on the line.
I can't imagine encouraging somebody that supported me politically to go and put themselves into harm's way. I can't imagine that, particularly when you know that these law enforcement officials had been shot at, a couple of illegal immigrants inadvertently killed because people were shooting at ICE officers. Their vehicles have been rammed by some of these peaceful protesters, probably the trained activists. They've had rocks thrown at their vehicles. I can't imagine encouraging people, put yourselves in harm's way. Get out there and record that. I, as a government official, would have said, back off. Let us work with ICE. Let's cooperate with them. Let's see if we can't de-escalate this. But Attorney General, you did the exact opposite. And 2 people are dead because you encouraged them to put themselves into harm's way. And now you're exploiting those 2 martyrs. That was a tragedy. It never should have happened. Now, we can investigate, but I can't imagine being a law enforcement official where I know my colleagues have been shot at, their vehicles rammed, that their trained activists deployed. And by the way, we know at least one of those activists had a semi-automatic pistol with extra clips. So now you're an ICE officer, you're doing enforcement action, you've got a team behind you trying to protect you, you've got all these trained activists behind you. Is it any wonder they're at hair trigger alert? A tragedy was going to happen, and you encouraged it. And you ought to feel damn guilty about it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, sit there and smirk. Smirk. It's sick. It is despicable.
Are you asking me for comment, Senator? Because everything you said was untrue. It was a nice theatrical performance, but it was all lies.
Senator Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're here today because Americans are outraged by the deliberate intimidation, trampling of civil rights, and lawlessness from this administration that has left 2 Americans shot dead, 2 American citizens shot dead by masked federal agents. And with respect to my colleague from Wisconsin, there is a long tradition in this country, especially in the civil rights movement, which finally brought us out of the Jim Crow era, of peaceful, nonviolent demonstration where people are trained so that when they are attacked, even by law enforcement who are escalating, they know how to stay calm. And it is because of that kind of nonviolent First Amendment activity that we were finally able to pass civil rights laws in this country. Immigration enforcement needs to combine strong border security with a targeted, focused effort on removing violent criminals. Instead, this administration's divisive, dangerous, and deadly actions are making our communities less safe. Today's hearing provides an important opportunity for us to hear from those on the ground and those in charge, because what is happening today is unacceptable to the people in my state of New Hampshire and to people from every corner, and in fact, people around the globe. Since I just got back from the country of Greenland, they know this too, and their children are scared of the United States of America. I hope that my Republican colleagues will continue the bipartisan conversations that some of us have been trying to have and are necessary to enact meaningful, common sense reforms to keep our communities safe. Now, to Mr. Schnell, last month, President Trump stated that Minnesota officials should turn over all criminal illegal aliens that are currently incarcerated in their state prisons and jails to federal authorities. As the head of the Department of Corrections, you run Minnesota's prisons, and in your testimony, you described how your department already works with ICE to transfer non-citizen prisoners in your custody to federal custody. You all do that. So you're doing your part, and you are working within the law to coordinate with ICE. I'd just like to hear from you, given your years of experience in law enforcement. Have the actions of ICE and the Trump administration improved effective law enforcement and cooperation in Minnesota, or have they made it more difficult?
Senator, the current operation makes it much more difficult. And I think, the levels of misinformation do become challenging. In fact, just in the past few days, in the White House X account, there was a post about the ICE's removal of the worst of the worst from Minnesota streets. And they cited Mr. Abdi Rashid Alim, his arrest and removal from Minnesota, when in fact, Mr. Alim was released directly to ICE on May 1st of 2025 from the Department of Corrections. And so this misinformation, I think, makes it much more challenging for law enforcement. And I think it's so contrary to the way it has historically been in terms of collaboration. And, this is one of the challenges I think we face.
Thank you. You also talked in your testimony about trust, saying, quote, "The erosion of trust between DHS and Minnesota is at the core of this crisis, and I suspect we will feel its repercussions for years to come." This is an incredibly important point. The greatest responsibility a government has is keeping its citizens safe. But that can't come at the cost of freedom and liberty. These things all have to work together, or you lose the trust of your citizens. And all across our country, and in my state of New Hampshire, law enforcement and communities work together in this way to work to be safe. So having lived this experience, what do you see as some of the repercussions of this loss of trust, and what can we do to rebuild it?
Senator, I think it happens here with this, and we'll start with this committee and with Congress taking, some clear action to address and rebuild the legitimacy and trust in ICE. And we want to be clear, there is a legitimate need for immigration enforcement and for addressing those people who represent, in particular, a threat to public safety. But I think what we want is to return to the days where there is close collaboration, as you described, where we can focus on key issues of community and public safety across our country. Things like transnational large-scale drug efforts, as well as human trafficking. These are really important issues that there has been longstanding collaboration, and I worry that because of what's happening today, those efforts will be lost, or we will not invest the kinds of resources that are needed in those areas.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess one last question. I come from a small state, but we have 234 cities and towns. And some of our police departments are a few officers